I'd like to call this regular city council meeting of October 27, 2014 to order. We would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call shows we have one department head on vacation. Two, correction, two. And we need to go with the approval of the minutes for October 13. Any additions, deletions, corrections?
I'll move them.
I'll second.
For discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of bills. Which I didn't happen to see many.
We don't have it.
Nope.
That's going to make it a really nice one next time. Approval of the agenda. Any changes from the city manager?
Don't have any changes, no.
Somebody want to move as
I'll move the
presented?
agenda as presented.
For the discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public comment. At this time, anybody wishes to speak on an item not listed on our agenda, you can do so. Come on up to the microphone, please. State your name and address.
Hi, I'm Corinne Caroli. My address is 22085 Brookfield Court.
Okay.
And the reason I'm here, it's a safety concern. I've been a resident of South Lyon now for 8 years, and I'm a mom of two. I have a son at Sayre and a daughter at the co-op. My family has never been actively involved in the city, in politics, anything. There's always been a lot of complaining and a lot of pointing fingers when things don't go right, but I never saw my parents or anybody take action. And now I'm a mom, and I'm in my 30s, and I'm really concerned about something very important. And I met Joe at the co-op. My daughter was going there about the same time as his, and I didn't know what to do with this, so I contacted him, and he encouraged me to address you. So that's why I'm here today. We live right between the two middle schools on 9 Mile, so very close to Pontiac and 9. And as you all know, that's a crazy intersection. It's very busy, especially in those morning hours where there's the commute and the school buses, and then again at 2:30 when the middle school lets out, and then again at 5 to 6 to 7 o'clock. It goes on and on. And I understand that a lot of that is Oakland County roads too. So I don't know how much the city can help me with this. But you do have a paper that Lynn graciously got for me with, it shows the traffic incidents, and they've doubled since I moved in 2006. And that doesn't include this year, which, just from my observation, our city has grown so much this last 2-3 years. I'm sure this year the statistics for accidents and incidents has gone up. That's just my guess from the amount of sirens that I hear constantly throughout the day. I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I get to see that intersection at all different times during the day too, you know, running errands and picking up and going to and fro. So I've seen countless accidents, little fender benders. My neighbor's car was totaled. And another big fear of mine is the pedestrians. Those middle school kids are only in the 5th and 6th grade, and you know, they're like 11-year-old boy. Wait, is that right? 11-year-old boys. They're really children, and it's 35 miles an hour through there. So during those times, it's even more dangerous. Oakland County came out, I think it was during the summer that I witnessed, and they we're working on all 4 pedestrian crossings at the same time. And as a mother, I mean, my kids are still tiny, but that just terrifies me. And there were holes where they had dug out the cement, and these young boys and girls were just jumping over them, and cars were going everywhere. And I called the city, and, you know, the police officers, as always, they do come and help us right away as much as they could, but I could babble on, so I'm going to try not to do that. But at the bus station, or the bus stop in the afternoon when I pick up my son, there's always sirens now, and we all just hold our breath and like say a prayer that it's not, you know, our kid's bus that was going through there at that time. So, get a little emotional, but it is scary there, and it's just going to get worse. So any way that I can assist in moving forward with this, anything to make this part of our town, the nucleus pretty much, safer, I'm willing to help. And I know that you don't comment back, but if anybody would like to speak to me about it, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walls?
Yes.
She did mention that if we wanted to comment, but I'll leave it up to you if I wanted to say something. Is that okay, or do I have to wait till public comment?
Public comment. Public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, old business, we don't have any. And new business, consider request for permit for the Cool Yule Parade associated with road closures and associated road closures planned for Saturday, December 6th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Do you want to do this, Chief, or I don't see any representatives here.
Yeah, I talked to Kim, and I thought either she was going to be here or she was going to send a representative, but I'm not sure she even works there anymore. So there's no changes from prior years. Cool Yule is a fairly easy parade for us to accomplish and facilitate. So I would recommend the same road closures as we've had in all of the prior years for Cool Yule.
Excuse me.
All right, I'll make the motion then that we approve the requested closures for the Cool Yule Parade on December 6th.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, now,
Very compelling there, Lloyd.
presentation of the annual audit. As we have the fine folks of Plant Moran here. Somebody want to stand up to the microphone and,
I'll take a first crack.
yeah,
Mayor, City Council members, we appreciate the opportunity to come tonight and talk about the results of the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2014, and some of our recommendations related to the financial matters of the city. Before I get going, I'd just like to thank, there's a lot of folks at City Hall who are involved in assisting us in getting ready for the audit and also for the facilitation of the audit itself. So I want to thank everyone who was involved with that. In particular, I know Lori Mosier's not here tonight. I believe she had a death in the family, but Lori is a real integral part of getting ready for the audit, and she did a nice job this year being prepared. And then we had a little bit of a baptism by fire for our new city manager as well, who was actually very involved in the audit. We have many communities where the city managers really kind of defer that responsibility, but Lynn was actively involved, in particular on the federal program side, so thank you for that. Prior to coming tonight, we do sit down and go through a meeting with Lynn and Lori just on a draft of the deliverables that are in your package. And at that time, we kind of walk through any recommendations that we have, talk about the results of the audit, get feedback on how we did during the audit, which we appreciated some of the candid conversation around that, and also talk about how we can improve it next year. So that happened roughly 3 weeks ago, and that kind of brought us to tonight. In your package, you should have 4 deliverables. There's a copy of the city audited financial statements, which is kind of the thicker package. There's a letter to the mayor and council, which is the written verbiage, which we'll cover in a little bit. There's a graph package, which really kind of puts in a graphical format some of the key results of the audit that we'll cover in a minute. And there's also a supplemental audit, which is for your federal program dollars, which is a little smaller package, which Manju is going to cover shortly. I would like to, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the financial statement themselves unless there's specific questions, but I would like to state for the record that you did have an unmodified audit opinion this year. That is the highest form of assurance that you can receive from a third-party firm with respect to your financial statements, and that indicates that we believe them to be materially correct. With that said, I'm going to pass it along to Keith. He was going to walk through some of the highlights in the graph. Following that, Manju was going to talk a little bit about the single audit results, and then I'll come back and briefly go through some of the highlights in the letter to the council and the mayor. Keith?
Good evening. I'm going to lead you through the graph presentation, which is just 12 or 13 slides to summarize instead of going through the 60 pages of financial statements themselves. Try and give you the highlights of the financial statements. If there are any questions as I'm going through them, please don't hesitate to ask. But jumping right into slide number 1, we've got a 4-year comparison of general fund revenue. As always, property taxes is the largest revenue source of the general fund. It's down about 5% from 2011 amounts, but considering the impact of the declines from 2008 and 2009 had on southeastern Michigan in total, the fact that South Lyon's impact for the last 3 years was 5% is a good position to be in relative to other communities in the area. Total general fund revenue has been very consistent for the last 4 years, and as we'll see on upcoming slides, by keeping a close eye on the budget and expenditures, the city's been able to maintain fund balance over the last 4 or 5 years. Slide number 2 takes just the 2014 revenue amounts for the general fund and breaks them out so you can see their comparison to the total. Once again, as with most communities, property taxes is by far the largest revenue source, making up roughly 2/3 of total general fund revenue. The other 3 pieces we've been broken out fairly closely approximate what they were last year. There were slight increases to state revenue as well as the fines, fees, and other category, and just a slight decrease to charges for services. Slide number 3 is in here to illustrate the timing of changes in taxable value and when they ultimately hit the city's financial statements. If you focus on the top 2 rows, you can see the budget year is across the top, followed by the assessment date. So for the June 30, 2014 fiscal year we're discussing, you can see the tax income, the property tax income for the last year was based on December 31st, 2012 assessments. So then they were then billed 6 months later and reported as revenue for 6/30/2014. So as taxable values are expected to increase, there will be a similar lag in when they ultimately become revenue for the city. And as you can see across the bottom line, 2014 reflects a very modest $1 million increase in taxable value, but it is the first increase in the last 5 years. Slide number 4 focuses on the city's second largest revenue source, state revenue sharing payments. The blue line across the top represents 2001 spending levels or revenue sharing from the state, and the orange line represents actual revenue sharing received from the state. As you can see, for every year since 2001, the actual state revenue sharing received by the city has been significantly less than it was in 2001. After 2001, the state began using revenue sharing payments. They reduced the revenue sharing payments to local governments in order to help balance their own budget. So you can see it bottomed out in 2010 when the city received less than $700 million, or excuse me, $700,000 compared to the over $1 million they received in 2001. So cumulatively from 2001 through fiscal year 2015, the city has received $2.8 million less than if they had received exactly what they did in 2001 for every year since then, not including inflation. So had the $1 million you received in 2001 been received every year since, you'd have had $2.8 million more from the state. Slide 5 is a 4-year comparison of total general fund expenditures. As with most communities, public safety is by far the largest revenue or largest expenditure source. And as you can see with the totals across the top, just as revenues have remained relatively consistent from year to year, So have expenditures. The difference from 2011 to 2014 is a 7% increase. So roughly just inflationary increases over each of the last few years. Then if you were to take the accumulation of the revenues we saw on the first slide, offset with the expenditures we saw on the previous slide, you'd roughly get to the change in the blue bar here, where we have a 5-year comparison of general fund balance, specifically the unassigned fund balance, compared to expenditures for the year. So for 2014, total expenditures were just under $5 million. The unassigned fund balance is at just under $3.4 million. So the city maintains healthy unassigned fund balance, and everything in the unassigned fund balance category is available for operations. On slides 7 and 8, we are attempting to give the city some information on their non-major governmental funds. So all of the governmental funds outside of the general fund. And really, as you can see, due to the variance in the different types of activities, there's no way to accumulate that and tell one consistent story. So instead, we presented the 2 pages from the financial statements, and on slide 7, we have the balance sheet. So you can see it includes 4 special revenue funds, including the major and local streets, the drug forfeiture grant fund, and the cemetery perpetual care fund, followed by 2 debt service funds and 3 capital project funds. And as you can see in the bottom third of the graph, the fund balances within each of those funds are dedicated to the operations of those funds themselves, whether they be legally restricted, committed by city council, or assigned by other actions. And on slide number 8, we can see what's basically an income statement for those funds. And while it can be difficult to get a picture of activity within these funds looking at just 1 year, that's due to the fact that certain funds may be accumulating reserves for a large capital project in the future, or there could be significant decreases in a particular year when a large project takes place. However, if you look at the third line from the bottom, the net change in fund balance, it was positive for each of the funds with the exception of 2 of them. As has been the case with the last few years, the expenditures in the cemetery perpetual care fund exceed the revenues. And the capital improvement fund balance decreased due to a one-time transfer of reserves to the water and sewer fund to pay debt service expenditures. On slide 9, we switch gears from the general fund and the governmental funds, which are accounted for on the modified accrual basis, and we now look at the government-wide net position. So this accumulates all of those funds we discussed, as well as the long-term assets and liabilities of the fund. So included in here are the investment in capital assets. So of the $28 million of governmental net position, 3/4 of it is invested in capital assets. So that's not in spendable form. Instead, it's investments in the buildings, equipment, and infrastructure. $1.8 million is restricted primarily for the major and local streets as well as the cemetery care fund, and $5 million is unrestricted and available for operations. Finally, on slide 10, we look at the water and sewer fund. The orange bar represents operating revenues, and the blue bar represents operating expenditures, excluding depreciation, but adding back capital improvements. So as you can see, for 2013 and 2014, the expenditures and capital improvements have significantly exceeded the operating revenue, and that's as a result of the Drinking Water Revolving Fund loan and the ongoing capital improvements for the water and sewer fund. Are there any questions on any of the graphs for the financial statements themselves?
I just wondered, on slide 4, you had brought up the missing 2.8 million. Was that simply to give context, or was that supposed to be editorial that, you know, to readjust our thought process and how we have to spend money?
I wouldn't say you need to adjust your thought process. It's just simply to illustrate state shared revenue is the second largest source of revenue for South Lyon. And because of the state's budget crunch going back 13 or 14 years, they've significantly reduced the amount they've shared with you. It decreased significantly through 2010, has been slightly increasing since then, and is projected to increase. The state's made additional appropriations for 2015. However, you'll still remain significantly below where you were 14 years ago.
Both a product of our SEV as well as...
This is based solely on the revenue coming from the state based on the state sales tax collections.
Oh, yes, okay, right. Property tax, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I was just going to cover the single audit that we performed. So it's that really thin report that says the report Federal Award Supplemental Information. So in that report, I just wanted to point out page 6 of the report, which is a schedule of all your federal expenditures that occurred during fiscal year 14. And essentially, a single audit is triggered if you have any expenditures of federal awards over $500,000. And this year, the total expenditures were 1.6 million, and it was primarily because of that drinking water revolving fund, which was used for water and sewer improvements. And that totaled to 1.6 million, and we tested that program this year. And we found no issues with regards to compliance with federal money from our testing of that one program. So that's basically the basis of this whole report. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mew.
Actually, I'm sorry, I do have one question about
Yep.
this. On page 8, under section 1, financial statements,
Yes.
there's 2 bullets, one on material weaknesses identified, no, and then the second bullet is significant deficiencies identified that are not considered to be material weaknesses. What does that mean? It was marked yes, I'm just curious what that means.
While performing our audit of the financial statements, we did have to post some adjustments that resulted in a deficiency in internal control, but it's not elevated to the threshold of a material weakness.
Okay,
That's
when
what-
you, I know, but what exactly,
Actually, we have that listed out on page 9. So if you look at page 9,
okay, all right,
so it's all in there, and it's kind of written out what happened and what we found, and management actually has a corrective action planned for it
okay,
already.
all right,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, Doug.
Thanks, Manju. On your state shared revenue question, two things come to mind when I think about that. So one is that cumulative number of 2.8. What that really means is that you were able to manage over that period of time with 2.8 million less in resources. So I think that's a compliment in my mind to both city council and city management to be able to manage through that. The reductions in state share revenue have primarily been on the statutory side because there's 2 pieces. There's a constitutional piece and a statutory piece. So when you see that decline in the graph, it's really that statutory revenue sharing that the state had been taking away for many years.
I might make one comment on that, though. You'll also see that our capital improvement fund has been pretty healthy simply because we've been a little skittish about getting into some of those funds, not knowing where things were going, so, you know.
Yes, understood. And now, your state share revenue this year was a little over $900,000, and almost 95% of that is constitutional, so you have very little statutory left that you're receiving. The last deliverable is the letter to the mayor and council. So I wasn't going to go through this in detail, but a couple things to point out. So at the beginning of the audit, we sit down, we meet with the mayor, and we go through what the audit plan is, kind of the scope of the audit, ask if there's anything that he'd like us to pay attention to, and then we send out a follow-up communication that goes to the city council members, really communicating that we've met with the mayor, if there's anything that you'd like us to pay attention to, laying out the scope of the audit, what the auditor responsibilities are, and also what management's responsibilities are. So that's on the front end of the engagement. The first part of this letter is really kind of the bookend to that. It's the back end of the engagement communication around, okay, now the audit is completed, here's how did it go. So I'm going to go over to page 3. And page 3 at the top under section 1 really just kind of lays out what the auditor's responsibilities are, and that there's a couple different paragraphs in terms of what we're responsible for with respect to the financial statements. We have plan, scope, and timing of the audit. It basically indicates that we did perform the audit consistent with the plan scope that we had laid out. We did not have to alternate our plan based on what we found during the process of the audit. On page 4, At the top, we're required to disclose if there's been any changes in accounting policies or any implementation of new accounting standards. This year, the city did implement GASB 65, and it really just changed the presentation on the balance sheet of a liability, which is now called a deferred inflow, as opposed to accrued liability or deferred revenue. And so that was a slight change in the presentation. It really didn't change the number, it just changed how it was presented. In the middle of page 4, it talks about accounting estimates. So accounting estimates are inherent in your financial statements. Not every number is exact. We tried to outline the ones that are the most sensitive, the ones that really have the most estimation involved with them. And those are principally around your assumption used for your retirement system. It would be an example of that, as well as for your OPEB or your post-employment retiree liability, as well as for your unbilled water and sewer receivables, because at the end of the year, that's an estimate as well, because they had not been billed at that point. Page 5 at the top. We have to report here if we had any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. So there are no uncorrected misstatements. We did have some journal entries, as Manju alluded to briefly in a response to a question. And so those were corrected. There weren't many of those, but there were a few. And now, under the accounting standards, if you have any type of journal entry that's proposed by the auditors that's more than inconsequential, it ends up as this deficiency category, which is kind of a strong word to use. But we're stuck with it. So we did have a couple different journal entries at the year end, but nothing too substantial. Page 6. So this is really some recommendations that we have. At the top, it talks about the year-end entries, so we've talked about those. So we also are going to come out next year in June ahead of year-end as well to sit down with Lori to cover anything that's new for the year as well and assist if needed with respect to journal entries for the year ended June of 15. There's a couple items on the information technology related to password length and complexity. We think there's some opportunities there to shore that up a little bit, as well as the server room to lock that up. We think that that's a best practice, and so we've made those recommendations there as well. Going down under the capitalization policy, so right now the city's capitalization policy is anything over $1,000 gets capitalized. We are seeing communities of your size and larger starting to use a little higher dollar threshold for capitalization, so that might be something you'd want to consider because there is an administrative burden of tracking lots of small stuff. But depending on really what your interest level is in that, your policy is fine as it is, but that may be something to think about going forward to up that a little bit. And then you mentioned earlier on the capital improvement side at the very bottom there, we do think it's a good idea, and we've talked to the city manager about it as well. I think she's in concurrence and was a big support of it, of making sure that we have capital improvement plans in place and having some type of rolling 5-year forecast around equipment replacement facilities. We think that's a best practice. We think it's really good for managing cash flow as well and kind of staging out when known improvements need to be made, as well as planning for unknown improvements that we know are going to be out there as the infrastructure and facilities age. At the top of page 7, Manju's going to spend one more minute with you at the very end to talk about the changes in the federal programs audit, but one of the items with respect to that are conflict of interest policies and some of the requirements around that related to federal programs. We think it's a good idea and a best practice to have conflict of interest policies for both the city itself as the entity as well as council members and staff. We think that that's something that you might want to consider, and we've seen a number of communities move in that direction. In the middle of page 7, it discusses a new pension standard. So next year, your statements are going to look different, at least the government-wide statements, because any unfunded pension liability will now be on the balance sheet. And so that's a decent-sized number here, as it is in many of our communities. That's on the government-wide statements, not on your general fund statements. And so your unfunded pension liability, which will look, the number will probably look a little different than it is in your statements because that's calculated a little bit differently, but that'll be on your government-wide balance sheet next year. And so that's something that we'll work with city management on and making sure that they're getting the right actuarial reports with respect to determining what that number is for next year. Page 7 and 8 talk a lot about state shared revenue and some of the new requirements for obtaining the statutory portion of the revenue, which used to be called EVIP. Now they have another name, City, Village, and Township Revenue Sharing that they call it, but it's really kind of the same stuff. And a lot of it is around transparency, reporting dashboards, those type of things which are required in order to receive those statutory dollars. Your statutory dollars, again, are about 5% of your total state shared revenue. Constitutional is about 95%. On page 9, talks about some of the things around personal property tax. I was not going to go into the detail of that. That's not a significant revenue source for you, but there will be some decline in personal property taxes going forward with respect to how it's calculated today. And it goes through a number of things in detail there of how that's going to be replaced through the state use tax. Bottom of page 11, similar now to state shared revenue monies, your Act 51 monies, the state has instituted a number of new reporting requirements. City management is familiar with those, and they've met the deadline with respect what needed to be done. Similar to state shared revenue, they're looking for transparency, they're looking for availability of certain information, and they're also looking for commitments around compensation and fringes in terms of limiting those to certain amounts and certain levels. And so that the details of that are discussed on page 11 and 12. The last item I wanted to point out was really this new rules governing management of federal programs, which is at the bottom of page 13. I was just going to ask Manju to spend a minute on that because this is something that if you are going to be subject to federal audits going forward, that you're going to need to make sure that this is adhered to. Manju?
Thank you, Doug. I just wanted to point out some of the changes. In December 2013, the Office of Management and Budget came out with this huge sweeping changes to what we've known as federal award audits for several years. And the changes can be broken out into 3 different buckets. The first change relates to changes in audit requirements, which impacts us more than the city. But the impact on the city will be that now the threshold that I was mentioning about $500,000 a little while ago, that's been bumped up to $750,000. So starting your fiscal years ending June 30th, 2016, the city would need a single audit only if you spent over $750,000 of federal awards. The 2 other changes, though, fall on the city's responsibility to ensure that the city is in compliance. The first one relates to cost principles. This is more for you to make sure that once you get a new award starting dated December 26, 2014 or later, that you follow the new cost principles. And if you do get an award, I can help out Lynn and Lori to kind of make sure that the right cost principles are being followed. The other piece is administrative requirements. Again, for any new award issued December 26, 2014 or later, there are certain administrative requirements that the city will now need to make sure. One of them is the conflict of interest policy that Doug just talked about, which should be both at the employee level, the council level, and then the organization level. And there are other certain required written procedures, like procedures related to cash management, allowability of costs, etc. So these changes are very significant, but again, they would impact you if you start spending any dollars under new awards that you would receive December 26, 2014 or later. Plant Moran does have some webinars out there and some articles. So if at all that situation comes up, again, we can help Lynn and Lori through it, but just kind of keep in mind all these changes and some of the impact that's going to have in terms of your procedures that you have in place. Any questions? Okay.
That single audit is only for spending in a
Yes,
fiscal year?
only
Yes,
for
okay.
spending.
Thank you, Manju. So that completes the formal part of the presentation. We'd be happy to entertain if there's any other questions on any of the topics and information discussed tonight.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Joe.
I recall when we were talking about the MERS and our unfunded liabilities, there was a number that stood out in my mind of 2.7 million unfunded. What is your prediction for, I mean, what are we currently at now, and what is your prediction for, let's say, the next year and the next couple of years after that?
I'll try and answer that. That's a good question, and I think it's an important question. Your actuary might be a little better positioned on determining what the liability is. Your unfunded liability, which is in footnote, in your thicker packet, which is in footnote 8, is about 2.7 million as of December 31st, 2013. So you're right on the nose as far as that number. Going forward, you've got a couple things going on. You have your investment gains and losses are being smoothed over a 10-year period. And so you have the losses from '07, '08, '09, which are being amortized still to date. And so that's going to impact what your funding position is, and as well as what your contribution amount is. But you also have some market increases in years subsequent to that, which also are getting smoothed over a 10-year period. So when you put those two together, the actuary would have to tell you exactly what that number is, but that's one of the factors that gets considered here. Right now, your actuarial value of your assets was actually higher than the market value of your assets at the last actuarial evaluation that was done. And what that means is that if they had used your market value of the assets in the calculation, your funded percentage would actually be a little bit less than it is. But because they use this actuarial method that smooths these investment gains and losses, your funding percentage is a little bit more, is raised a little bit higher than it would be if you were using fair market value of assets. Keep in mind that was as of December of 13. You're part of MERS. MERS has roughly 730 communities that are part of it. 15% of those communities are 100% funded or more as of December of 12. Another 60% are roughly 2/3 funded. So you're in that upper third in terms of your funding as it stands today. But I also know the council has been looking at that unfunded liability, which is, a good-sized number, and trying to figure out what options might be available for the council and city management to consider going forward with respect to trying to close that gap. And I know you've had some conversations with MERS around that. What I mentioned to city manager later was she had talked about one possible option, and so we're going to go back and check and see how many of our communities have gone down that path with that particular option with MERS, and maybe get her in contact with those communities to have further dialogue around that topic to see if that might be an alternative to your current situation with respect to the plan. As you know, a lot of the plans are collectively bargained, and so there's a lot of considerations there to be considered. But I think looking at your assumptions, seeing if there's anything that you can do with those in terms of trying to enhance either the investment returns or taking a look at other options, for example, employee contributions. I know that's something that some communities have done to try and, again, close that gap on the unfunded liability. Did that help?
Mr. Mayor, may I say?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it helped a little bit, still some confusion. So let's say if we were to stay on our current path of what we're doing now, we don't change any plans, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, would that number of the 2.7, would that climb as more unfunded? What would you predict that we would be at if we were to stay?
Well, theoretically, what's supposed to happen is, so you've been making 100% of your annual required contribution, so you have not been underfunding your annual required contribution. By state law, you have to fund that. What is happening, though, is that unfunded liability is being amortized over a 30-year period, and each year that's getting dropped. So right now, you're at 27 years. So if everything went according to your assumptions, you would pay off that unfunded liability 27 years from now, presuming that you continue to fund 100% of your annual required contribution. Absent making advance payments on that, or changing assumptions, or changing facts around the benefits for the plan, I think you're going to continue to move along that path where you're going to chip away at that 2.7 million, assuming the market stays relatively consistent, but it's going to take a number of years to make that go away.
That is a fluid number, too. I mean,
It
it's a
is.
snapshot in time, so.
It is, but because of the smoothing, the fluidity should not be extravagant,
Yeah.
because they're amortizing both gains and losses over that 10-year period. So if you have a large market decline or a large market increase, you're not immediately feeling the impact of that. That is getting smoothed in over that period.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Other questions? Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Plant Moran. We appreciate all your efforts, as usual. Thank you. Keith, thanks. Okay, we can move on to the next part of our agenda, which is I don't know if we had a resignation handed in, but we do need to put in a Parks and Rec Commission member for Denise Simeon. I did talk to her on the telephone. She was very enthused and wanting to get involved, and I think we're kind of lucky to have somebody with this kind of experience happened to move to our town about a year ago. And she has a lot of experience with the Huron and Clinton Metro Parks as their former communications manager. And so she's looking along the promoting of our parks and trying to come up with some projects for the parks. And I think that's sounds very positive. Anybody have any, she, by the way, said she had another function, or otherwise she'd be here tonight.
Well, I'll support your recommendation.
I'll second.
All right. She's in, once we vote her in. Any further comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Trick or treat hours.
I was looking through past agendas, and I know this is late, but I realized the council hadn't officially set the trick-or-treat hours, and we're down to the last minute. It's 5 days before Halloween.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time.
Can we make them later this year?
Harvey would like it at his house only till 11.
Got plenty. I've been to
Actually,
Costco.
it's interesting that you say that. There was a question on the listserv about changing trick-or-treat hours, and the general consensus was you don't mess with Halloween or trick-or-treat. So you're more than welcome to set them for a later time, but most people probably will generally
gonna
do
stop
what's
'em.
generally accepted.
Well, I'll make the motion to set the hours for trick-or-treating from 6 to 8 p.m. for this Halloween.
I'll support it.
Okay. Aaron?
When?
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh, do you say? They don't have it on that side street.
Consider resolution to opt out of Act 152. Want to give a clarification what we're opting out of for the public's sake?
The Act 152 is the cost-sharing requirements for the medical benefits plan. We have negotiated with all of the collective bargaining units and are in the process of moving towards that, and will reach the 20% cost share that is required by the state by 2017 through all the collective bargaining agreements, but we have not reached that yet, and therefore we need to pass an annual resolution to opt out until all the collective bargaining agreements reach the 20%.
I move we opt out.
Second.
Further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consider proposals from Johnson, Rossetti, Schultz, and Shupix to amend retainer agreement. You threw options 1s and 2s and so forth at us. I don't know if we're supposed to just select that on the spot, or if there's some way of, what do you got, I don't know, what do you have to say about it, Tim?
Well, I've provided counsel over, I guess it would be 30-plus days, some background information regarding the number of hours that we provide in legal services to the city on an average monthly basis. Based on the retainer, what that works out to as far as an hourly rate. I recently provided some updated information that puts us in the range of about $70 an hour, which is considerably below market rate and what we would charge all of our other clients for municipal type work. We recognize that we are in a retainer agreement with the city. It did have a year, after a year it had a reopener provision. We do have 2 full years of experience with those numbers, and those have been provided to you. Really, it boils down to, you know, myself and my firm are asking for an adjustment in the retainer amount to make it a little more fair and closer to or at our market rate that we charge for municipal clients. We don't think that's unreasonable, and I think it's based on numbers. You know, I've tried to be transparent on this, and, you know, normal hour, if you had to go out in the market, you would pay considerably more than you are right now. I certainly understand that we're under an agreement. If you want to wait, that's certainly your prerogative. I would ask for a change right now, and if whatever arrangement might be looked at right now and agreed to, we could reevaluate when the contract is up in July of 15. So I've presented 2 primary options. I guess my only comment on the options is, in 2012, it was my understanding, and I don't know where this idea comes from. I imagine it's from former manager Murphy, to go to a retainer, flat retainer for all legal services. Whether you're wed to that or not, I'm not sure. And if the council wanted to deal with this outside of an open meeting, that's fine. We could certainly get more details and have some discussion with the administration and work through it that way. But I really just wanted to get you some information so you know what's going on as far as my perspective on the financial component of our retainer, and make the request that we adjust that. And there are two specific options. One is a flat retainer. It's a considerable jump. The other is to do a lower flat retainer with hours above, I forget the exact number, 70 hours, I think.
75, yeah.
75 hours would be billed at a higher rate. So it would be 120, option 2 is 120 up to 75, just a flat number, and then above that, it would be at 150 an hour.
I had two questions. First option, you suggest that it recognizes and maintains a retainer arrangement as well as significant increase in the city's use of legal services. So what, I mean, you kind of couch it in terms that make it sound as though it would broaden the scope of what was available for us to take advantage of your firm
No, it's,
on that we don't now.
that statement is more it's related to the number of hours that I'm providing to you based on the need for legal services. So we were a little bit in the dark when we bid for this project, and there was not a lot of information as to the number of hours that your former city attorney billed. We did have some budget information, and really, over the last 2 years, it's averaged out to 87 hours a month, which is roughly $70 an hour for myself and my firm. There are some items that are outside of retainer, just so you're aware of that. There's MTT, labor are the primary ones. So prosecutions and general city work are covered under the retainer.
Your second option, what was the trigger at 75 hours? I mean, is it just arbitrary, or?
I think I was trying to come up with a number that was acceptable as far as a monthly number, an increase above the 6250 currently, and yet provide an option where excessive use of legal services will result in a higher hourly rate to try and bring the 120. So at that number, the 9,000 per month comes out at 75 hours comes out to 120 per hour, which is still below our firm's hourly rate for municipal clients. So after 75 hours, it would go above our normal hourly rate, and depending on how many hours are ultimately billed, that number would blend over the total number of hours. So there is, under that option number 2, there's a risk for the city, there's a risk for myself and my firm, depending on the number of hours billed. And I honestly don't usually have a very good idea very specific idea of how many hours are in for a month. So it's not like I'm gonna be pushing the pedal down kind of thing. I usually don't have that number until after the close of the month.
It seemed like there was fewer blips in disparity for monthly from the prosecutorial side than there was for your side. There were, increases occasionally, but he seemed to be a little bit more regular. And I was just kind of curious. Typically you're putting in like a little over 14 hours a week for us. So I don't know. Are you?
So Chuck does the call in the district court, and I think his blips are if there's a trial.
Okay,
So he goes
right.
and he shows up with a stack of cases, and he works through those. If cases out of that stack go to trial, that would be his blip in time.
Yeah, okay.
Depending on how many go to trial. And to be very frank with you, you've had some unusual things. You've gone through a city manager search, and there's been some internal things and external things that have taken a lot of time. I don't know that, I was surprised at how consistent the number started to be after a while. So that leads me to believe that I don't see a lot of erratic swings. I don't foresee that in the number of hours that you're demanding.
I'm just hoping that that isn't the equivalent of saying that there's going to be a great deal of chaos in our future, because that's, I mean, the turbulence has really driven a great deal of your activity, so.
Well, and that would be to your advantage. You know, if you want to set up an arrangement where that's to your advantage, I think that option is available. I'm certainly willing to talk about that. I do think now that you've hired a city manager and got her in place, I would hope your
Yeah, that's kind of
volatility
what I
would
was.
go down, as you put it.
Mr. Mayor?
Joe?
Our current retainer fee is what, $6,500?
6250.
$6,250, yeah, I wrote that down first, and then, so what you're essentially asking for in option one is increasing it from $6,250 to $11,000. I mean, that's not double, but what is that? My math serves me, but
1 3/4 times, yeah.
yeah, there you go. That's a huge increase. Now, I was reading the minutes from 2012 when we hired your firm, and one of the reasons, it says in the minutes, that we selected you was based off of the price. Now, I recognize that, well, first of all, let me back up a little. We don't have to take any actions tonight, and I agree with you on that, because the contract's not due until, what is it, July of 2015? So I think it would be, in my personal opinion, kind of unwise to take an action today when we're just looking at this, when we have really until many months to iron out a new contract, whatever it is. So I think today it would just be silly to go through with that. So, but as I was saying, one of the reasons why we hired you was based off your price, and now we are asking for, I want to call it not quite double, but significantly higher. So, yeah, there's a proposal in front of us, but I would like to see from our city manager to put together some sort of a counter proposal and not just say, hey, this is put in front of us, so we got to take option one or two. I think that would be kind of unwise to go that route. So, yeah, with that being said, I don't see why we need to take any action tonight.
Mr. Mayor.
Mike?
Tim, I gotta be honest with you, I'm having problems with this. It's a significant increase. And we did have a lot of stuff going on internally and externally during that time period that you're using to compute your hours. And I don't want to be in a situation where we raise your, hypothetically, we raise your monthly retainer, and then we see you're working, you know, your hours go back to like 43 or 50 or 60 hours a month, something like that, and you're getting, you know, an additional amount. I'm kind of curious, if we had a monthly retainer, I know your firm probably requires you to keep track of your hours, but who is setting what you're doing as far as the work you're doing for the city? Is that through Lynn, the city manager, saying, okay, this is what I need you to focus on? Or are you basically saying, okay, this is what I have to do, and then you're keeping track of the number of hours?
All of my time spent on South Lyon work is kept track of, so it's
Oh, I
built.
know, I understand that, but as far as priorities are
As far as the
concerned.
priorities, it's a combination of both. Some of it's
Okay.
self-driven based on the concept or the matter in front of me. Other issues come from Lynn. There's always communication between myself and the city manager as to what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. We determine when council needs to be informed of important matters that pertain to council and what you would need to know. So if I could just respond, if, as to your concern that if you bump and then somehow you're going to get less service, I had every incentive, given the numbers, to do that already. Why would I short you on service when I'm actually getting paid what I think I'm worth? I think you're
No,
going to see,
I understand
I have
that.
every motivation to provide the highest level of service to the city.
No, I understand that. I'm not concerned about that. I'm just, part of your proposal that you made to the city was based on, now, it may have been, you're right, it may have been misinformation. Yeah, or you didn't realize the amount of work that was going to be done while you were working as a city attorney. But the proposal made. I mean, we interviewed other attorneys, other law firms, and price was a factor, I think, in why you were selected in the first place, your firm was. Now we're in a situation where, okay, are we gonna have to go do the interviews again to see if, based on your work, on the amount of hours, what other firms would come up and say, hey, look, this is what we can do under a monthly retainer. And that's, because now you have documentation that would be available to other firms to say, hey, we could bid for these services now because we have an idea of what the amount of work would be. So I mean, by asking for the proposal for us to look for it, look at raising your monthly retainer or doing a couple of different options, we're now faced with, okay, are we gonna do this, or should we do another RFP for a city attorney to see if we can get a better competitive rate? So I don't know, it's a two-way street with your proposal.
Certainly. And just to keep in mind that the retainer agreement does include a reopener provision, I forget the paragraph number, where that was included to protect both sides of the contract in the event of something is out of whack. And that's really the only reason I'm here. I think you're under market as far as what you budgeted and how you're using legal services. And you're correct. I think if you had to go on the market, you'd be a much higher number now. And I'm certain, my goal here is to just achieve a fair rate for our services. And I understand we're under contract, but there is a reopener, and I'm asking under that provision.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Well, I'm just gonna call it like it is. What you're asking for is a price increase. I mean, it's as simple as that, is it? Yeah, I mean, you can say we're trying to be fair. Yeah, trying to be fair, but we're trying to increase your price and your profit, and, it comes two ways. Like Mike said, I agree with you. If you're gonna ask for a price increase, then with that comes more scrutiny. Okay, how many hours are you spending? Do we really need you to spend this many hours? Is it necessary to maybe go to the planning commission meetings when we already have a certified planner for over 30 years? I mean, those are billable hours. I've been on the zoning board of appeals for, I don't know how many years, but we never used to have an attorney sit at the zoning board of appeals. Is that necessary? I'm just using those as examples. It opens up all those types of questions. And I really think that this $70 an hour figure is a little misleading because it goes into priorities. Because if we really looked at the priorities, there wouldn't be spending as many hours. And that 70 wouldn't be as, seem as outrageous, I guess. So, sorry, I'm not trying to, I just kind of agree with Mike on this one. It does open up some scrutiny, and if necessary, I would be all for doing another RFP just to test the market. Like I said, we have plenty of months to still look at this, so hey, it doesn't hurt, so.
If I could, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would encourage anybody who's is interested in this concept. I think I'd like to have individual conversations with council people about why I think these numbers are the way they are compared to the past. I have opinions on that. I'm not going to air them out right here. But I do think there's a reason that the numbers are the way they are, and where the original bids for the contract in 2012 came in at the numbers in the range that they did, and why I'm here today with significantly different numbers.
Was your pitch a reflection of what the previous work had been, the previous attorney's work had been, hour-wise?
I think you're getting much higher level of service at this point.
Harvey?
Thank you. Now I lost my train of thought. I recognize from the numbers that you provided us that the services that are being provided currently way under market value, and I would agree that there needs to be something done to adjust that. Whether there's an opportunity here for, as you say, some individual conversations, also some conversations with the city manager to see if maybe we can refine the scope of work so that the hours, pay per hour is more balanced and more toward your firm's expectations. And again, I would not be in favor of going out to an RFP again. I was on the committee when we hired Johnson Rossetti, and that was, of the groups that we interviewed, this group was clearly the best group
It wasn't strictly the financial.
Financial, right?
So my preference would be that we continue our association with Tim and with Johnson Rossetti, but find some way to even out the inequity that Tim is pointing out. Thank you.
Ted?
Aaron?
I would like to see, an analysis done on, I mean, you give us that nice memo occasionally, we get it, what you're working on.
You know, I
You-
stopped doing that
Yeah.
after David left.
Yeah, and when you did that,
If you'd like that, I can certainly do that.
I did kind of like it, and I don't know if Lynn can go back through some of the old ones and really see, you know, what he's doing and
That's more hours billed.
what he should be doing, you know? And I understand Harvey just said it's more hours billed, but it does give us, and maybe not do it in the future, but if it's something that Lynn can look at in the interim to see where he was, what he was doing, and if you need to be doing all that work, or if some of that can be done in-house and stuff like that. So I'm interested in that. I understand asking for a raise, and, you know, there's always a negotiation and always a compromise with that, but just need a little bit more information on where we're going to go forward and how much we're going to lean on the attorney. And, you know, like you said, you know, hopefully our chaos is somewhat over.
Settled down a bit.
Settled over, and we can, you know, but I think that those memos that you were giving is a good indication of some of the things that he did that maybe could have been handled by others.
Okay.
So I'm just looking for more information. I mean, I don't have a problem with a price negotiation. Everybody negotiates prices. It's the way businesses run, you know? And, but I think that just picking one or two, I think we need more information. Thanks, Ted.
I just had one more thing. I was kind of curious. First off, I don't think that you're married to these numbers. Yeah, so, I mean, it's
I made
per-
that clear. Yeah,
pretty
I'm willing to
conceptual that there's one that's a fixed retainer, and then there's one that's a kind of an amalgam of, you work up until such and such a time. I'm not completely against the idea of a renegotiation or a resubmittal to look for a new firm, but that would absolutely be the last step, and personally, I'd be a hard sell to think that was a viable option. I think we've spent a great deal of time with Tim, and for him to learn us and us to learn him and form a relationship that I feel quite comfortable that we're getting sound legal advice, and we've never been in peril as a product of what you've offered us. So I think that that's a pretty valuable thing, so that's all I have.
Okay. So I think we considered your proposals and discussed it.
Yep.
If you want to pursue communications individually, I don't see any problem with that. I would hope that we could get to something sooner than later. We only have generally three more council meetings for this year.
That's hard to believe.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe, but we might want to maybe bring it back, if not in 2 weeks, but maybe by the next one after that anyways. I would hope we can resolve this within a month.
I do appreciate council's consideration.
Okay, thank you. Managers report.
I just have a few things this evening. You have in front of you a memo, and if you read the weekly report, we need to set a special meeting this week for discussion on the medical benefits for the employees. Just finally got the last of the information from our benefits broker today on that. And the open enrollment is scheduled to start November 1 for benefit renewal on December 1. Our current medical benefit plan will no longer be available as of our new benefit year. So I have gone over in the memo the options that they provided and gave my recommendation, but the council will need to vote on it, and we also need to take it to the collective bargaining units.
So you're asking us to pick a date for a special meeting?
I'm suggesting Thursday, the 30th, for a special meeting.
It's
Okay, I'm
business
seeing
trick or
there's-
treat.
Huh?
That's
the
business
downtown
trick or treat.
trick-or-treating going on.
We could do it
Okay.
in the morning.
I can't.
Me neither.
We could do Friday, which is Halloween, which everyone will probably want to be home for. Depending upon how long you need to look at the memo, we could do it Tuesday or Wednesday, but there is an 18-hour notice requirement.
I can't do any day this week.
If we could do it early next week, we would only be short a couple of days of the open enrollment period for the employees.
I mean, if you have to do it this week, that's fine. I just can't do it this week.
Well, I mean, the earlier we do it, the better. If we had to do it early next week, Tuesday obviously is out because it's election day, and city clerk won't be available.
What about
Saturday morning? I've done those before.
Saturday morning, I'm supposed to be at Ford Field for state band competition.
and I've got a wedding to do here.
And I hope my son will be in the Panther Bowl.
The Panther Bowl, that sounds... what about this Wednesday, 2 days from now? Can we get a quorum here for that?
I'm available.
I'm available.
I'm not.
Wednesday day or night are you talking?
I assume he's talking Wednesday night.
Wednesday night?
Do we have enough time to get it posted? I guess
We would
do.
for Wednesday.
Yeah.
For Wednesday, it just takes 18 hours.
I'm good Wednesday.
I am too, so that's
Me too.
4.
That's enough, right?
What time are you thinking on Wednesday?
I don't know, we have to go at 7:30 at night. I mean, it shouldn't be that long a thing. Is this something we can do earlier?
I didn't hear you, Lenny. Are you available?
I'm working,
That's pretty much every night?
well, Monday through Friday, or Thursday, excuse
Monday
me.
through
Yeah.
Thursday?
I mean, if we do it at 6, and I don't think it will take that long, hopefully I can do it, because my son's football game is at 7.
I think that was something that we should get
Are you
through.
okay with me?
To do a
6
6
o'clock on
o'clock is
Wednesday?
fine by me.
Yeah.
Yep, I could do 6.
6 o'clock.
All right, sounds like we resolved it.
Okay. And then we've got the downtown trick-or-treating from 6:30 to 8:30 on Thursday.
I think it's 6 to 9, isn't it?
Now, I double-checked the website.
Oh,
It's
6:30 to 9.
8:30.
8:30? Oh,
6
2
to
hours.
9 is the closure of the
Yeah,
road.
6 to 9 is the street closure, 6:30 to 8:30 is the actual.
They better be ready at 6. I'm talking about the businesses.
Okay. And then we will get the DPW in here to change the clock battery and change the clock time before the time change, which is on Sunday. I know the mayor was going to bring that up. And then I want to remind everybody that Wednesday night at 8:30 is the band's last outdoor practice before they go to state, and they are asking for everyone to pack the stands. It's the competitive marching band at South Lyon High's last outdoor practice, and they are currently ranked 5th in the state for Flight 2.
I can hear them in my yard.
Well, come out and watch them.
What
I
night
can.
is
They've got a
this?
great show.
I
What
can.
night?
To the council.
Wednesday night, 8:30 at the South Lyon High School football field.
They were weren't they practicing on Sunday this year? Or was it, no, it was Saturday. They were
Every Saturday they have
Yep, I heard
practiced.
them this weekend.
between Panthers?
They actually went to Lake Huron, to the Lakeland Invitational this weekend and took first place. So, if you can't make it to state
Must
at
be that
Ford
new
Field on
percussion guy,
Saturday,
that new percussion guy in there, eh?
it must be.
We imported him from Kansas.
That's all I've got tonight.
Okay, thank you. Bev?
I just wanted to say that we had some out-of-town company last weekend, so we were showing them around South Lyon. And we went into the Polish pottery new store there. And the owner, I was talking to her, and she said a week from this Saturday, they're having a grand opening. And they're gonna have a Polish artist doing glass blowing demonstrations, and Jake's from the Witch's Hat is gonna give a talk on the history of the building itself, and they're gonna have food and prizes and everything, so maybe be good to check it out.
Cool. Mr. Kramer?
Yeah, I've been asked to see if the Pumpkin Fest Committee can give a presentation to the council, the first council meeting in December. They wanted to give a little rundown of how the Pumpkin Fest went, and also give some financial information on their revenues and what happened. In addition, I believe there's something going on this weekend, Sunday, at St. Joe's about a drug awareness seminar. I think that's going on this weekend. I may be wrong on the date, but I know, I think somebody from the police department is speaking. Is it this Sunday?
I'd have to check the schedule. I'm not aware of it
Okay.
right
And I
this
think-
second.
Right, okay, and I think somebody from that fan is gonna be there as well, and they're doing a presentation, so if anyone's interested, I think it's a 2-hour presentation on drug awareness. So just want to let people know that. Thanks.
Harvey?
I'm good, I think, thank you.
Okay. Glenn?
Well, as to Lynn's, the whole thing with the South Lyon Band, they're playing Pictures at an Exhibition is their piece, which is a really nice piece of music. We were at the Brighton game on Friday with South Lyon. They're Marching 200, I think, is
Oh,
the
yeah,
name of
that's
their
what
band.
I counted.
Seeing 200 people out there, I have to admit, they don't have a great deal of marching skills, but it was impressive to see a band of that size, and if people have lived here for a while, you know, we used to enjoy bands that were about that size, so, but they were playing pretty straightforward. I mean, it was almost like marching Oompa music, so it's nice to see our stuff, and it was nice to see our team prevail during the playoffs, and is it Northville they're playing this week?
They're playing Wall Lake Western
Wall Lake
at
Western,
Wall
oh.
Lake
Okay, good, all right,
Friday.
good. Oh, that's all I had.
Aaron?
I'm good, thank you.
That would make sense.
Joe?
Oh, yeah, a couple of things. When credit's due, I like to give credit, and that goes to Lyon Township. They did a great job with their Halloween party at the fire station in New Hudson. It looked like it was packed. They said there was over 500 kids and families last year. Also, I attended the Business Expo on Saturday at the high school, and it was a great representation of the businesses. It seemed like almost 90% of the businesses from the Chamber of Commerce were there, so.
You're talking food places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that and other businesses were there as well. Also, lastly, wanted to respond to Ms. Corley. Yeah, as she mentioned, she did approach me because we had a connection at the co-op, and I kind of feel for what she's saying. I actually really feel, because I've witnessed some accidents. I saw last year kind of a bad accident. There was a motorcycle right at that corner at motorcycle accident right at the corner of 9 Mile and Pontiac Trail, and I call him a kid. He was kind of maybe a teenager, I don't know, but he was rear-ended just sitting there, and he upended, and he looked pretty shaken up. And it's not just that intersection. It seems like there's always accidents, and again, I know this is It kind of comes with the territory when you have more population and there's not much you can, that's kind of what comes with the territory. And for me, the long-term solution is paving Griswold, and again, this is out of our jurisdiction, I understand that, and also paving Dixboro but I'm just looking at the big picture. So if we could have all three of those main arteries open, I think that would alleviate some of the traffic issues, but again, I understand it's not really the city's responsibility. But with that being said, it's not just that intersection. It seems like there's constantly, at least once a week or every couple of weeks, somebody's asking, hey, there was a gentleman that approached me and said, hey, can we evaluate 10 Mile and see if there's a crosswalk? We can maybe get there. I don't, then I know there's a petition going around for, by the middle school, getting maybe potentially a crosswalk there. My understanding is several hundred people have signed it. So my request to you, Ms. Ladner, is maybe you could work with Ms. Corley or work with other other government agencies such as Oakland County and see if there's anything we can do just to overall improve the safety of the area. And I'm just asking for your support as much as we can get. So, thank you.
Okay.
Ed, can I comment off of that?
Sure.
Chief, what is our ticket writing for texting and driving? Isn't that a ticket for texting and driving? Do we write those in the city?
We write them if we catch them.
Okay, because I could probably write 12 a day. So I was just wondering what our percentage of that is.
On yourself?
I do not text and drive. I will say that. I am 100% not a texter and driver. I've got my phone locked, so I can't even do that while I'm driving. But I was just wondering what our percentage is. I mean, do we do a high amount, or is it an average amount for other cities, or
In
are
all
we?
honesty, I would say we would probably do a fairly low amount, but our warning to ticket ratio is roughly 2.5, 3 to 1. So our overall ticket writing is going to be on the low side compared to many communities. Number of reasons for that. Some communities write tickets only for revenue. We don't engage in that.
Maybe, and I'm fine with warnings for people who are texting and driving, to just let them know that it's being looked at in the city, because I do see quite a bit of it.
And their warnings are registered, they put that in there, so they know if they've been warned before or not.
I think that might be, something, just something to think about too in this city, because I, like I said, I do see a lot, and it's not me.
Well, if we're
It's
given to
not
do
you.
a lot of warnings, I would hope that we'd be very aggressive about pursuing the warnings, I mean, so you get the message out there strongly.
I mean, the
So-
statistics show it's just like drunk driving,
Yeah,
so, I mean, the statistics are out there for that.
okay,
Just a suggestion.
yep, thanks. I did see Glenn at the game, and we'll take a luck anytime to get to 8-1 like we did on that particular game. A very exciting game, and it's always good to beat Brighton. And especially we hadn't played them in a few years, and so it was, and you're right about the 200-member band. They did have problems with their marching.
They were great in the stands, though.
Yeah, they sound great in the
Very
stands, yeah.
enthusiastic in the stands.
Yeah, so, I mean, compared to, we may have a smaller group, but we're pretty precise. I think we do have a great band. And I believe East is pretty good, too, from what I've seen with the parade and so forth. I did go to Marquette last week, or on that venture to the north. I kept going and going and going. I didn't realize how far west I had to go, too. But I was signed up for the trails and so forth by Lynn. She'd already had picked my what I was supposed to do, so I get this tag saying, you're doing this, this, and that. And I'm glad I went to that. I have a couple quick ideas I'd like to throw out. I think the kids in our town could use a little area that with mountain bike paths. I'm thinking along the line somewhere maybe on the west side of the hill and in that area down in McCaddy Park for starters. But what it is, it's just no wider than this, and it's hard pack, and they have little jumps and stuff, and I think it'd be nice for the kids that like to do their, this would be with their not motorized, of course, just the little mountain bikes. And they call it the grog or something like that there in Marquette, by the way, was rated as one of the top 10 trail cities in the country. And they had that. And they also were providing another presentation from the Gladstone community was the, again, we have a hill, but maybe one part of it could be used for snowboarding and put some jumps in there. Put it, be it old oil barrels they were showing, the things you can, just simple, it doesn't cost anything. And then a rail, you know how they always like to ride a rail? Well, on their skateboards, well, they can do this with their snowboards, and it's just about this wide. And it's something simply that we can make and not be too costly at all, and just add a little bit of spice to the kids' snowing hill, for instance.
Did they require them to wear helmets in these?
In their case, they were, any more than when they're sledding, are we requiring them to wear their any kind of helmets for that? You know, that's the thing, you know.
Yeah.
Generally, a lot of people have their bike helmets or whatever, and they use those or whatever.
Yeah.
We all hit our heads in our day.
Well, that's just it. I mean, we were
You know?
rough and tumble, but, I mean, that's kind of years gone by.
Yeah, I know, and I think a lot of people do look at safety on that, and so, anyways, I've
Can't
thrown.
ride your bike in Kensington now without a helmet.
You're
No,
right.
that got canceled.
You're kidding?
It's canceled. They took it off.
After the motorcycle thing went through, you mean?
After the motorcycle thing went
for
through.
heaven's sakes.
Yep, you can free ride in Kensington.
And so, and I took liberty to, of course, I'm there, and there was other things, you know, I went to another meeting in there dealing with public acts, jotted down some stuff, and quizzed our city manager, and she blew away the charts. She had it all covered, and even knew names of things, and I was real pleased with that, I feel pretty safe that she's doing her darndest everywhere she can on, like, making sure we follow the right acts.
Pop quiz.
Yeah, pop quiz. She got popped, and it was a piece of cake for her. So, and with that, I think we can call for an adjournment.
Can I just,
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to
That's
defer.
fine.
I had one more item. Yes, go ahead.
that drug discussion is actually with the South Lyon Schools. It's going to be at St. Joe's from 3:30 to 5:30 on Sunday. And the keynote speakers are Father Stan, Sergeant Chris Fott from the South Lyon Police Department, and there's going to be a witness story, a former South Lyon student who had an addiction and his or her recovery. So, and it is going to be with Families Against Narcotics, and there's going to be questions in an open forum. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, we call for an adjournment.
Move that we adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That ends our meeting of approximately 1 hour and 22 minutes. Thank you.